In the shadowed corners of America's justice system where the scales of life and death tip in silence, a rare and haunting truth emerges. Women, often young and scarred by their own storms, have walked the final mile to the execution chamber. Since the death penalty roared back to life in 1976, only a handful of women, 18 in all, have faced that ultimate judgment. But among them, the youngest at the time of their crimes carry stories that chill the soul. Tales of shattered families, desperate motives, and unbreakable evidence. These were women in their early 20s, their lives unraveling into unimaginable violence. What drives a young mother to turn a gun on her own blood? How does jealousy carve a path to murder? Tonight we unravel these tragedies, not to glorify the darkness, but to bear witness to the lives lost, the justice sought, and the final breaths taken in the name of retribution. Prepare yourself, for the road ahead is one of quiet horror and unrelenting truth. If you're drawn to untold stories of crime and consequence, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. Your support helps us uncover more like this. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's begin. Imagine a warm April evening in 1987, in the heart of Houston, Texas, a place where families chase dreams under wide Texas skies. A young couple, married young and already parents twice over, argue behind closed doors. Money is tight, temptations pull from outside, and in the hush of night, a single decision echoes like thunder. But what if that decision wasn't born of rage, but cold calculation? What if insurance papers, signed in haste, hid a motive as sharp as the bullet that followed? This is the story of Frances Elaine Newton, the youngest woman ever executed in modern America. For her crimes, a mother who at just 21 years old, ended 3 innocent lives in a hail of gunfire. Her path to death row began not in fury but in the quiet forgery of hope, turned deadly. Growing up in a working-class world, she navigated the rough edges of youth with a mix of determination and quiet rebellion. By her early 20s, Frances had married Adrian Newton, a 23-year-old man with steady hands and a kind heart, who worked odd jobs to keep food on the table and dreams alive for their growing family. Adrian was the rock, the one who coached Little League on weekends, fixed bikes in the driveway, and read bedtime stories to their son, Alton, a bright-eyed 7-year-old boy who loved dinosaurs and dreamed of becoming an astronaut. Their baby girl, Farah, just 22 months old, was a bundle of giggles and tiny steps, her chubby cheeks lighting up rooms with innocent wonder. The Newtons' home was a modest ranch-style house on the east side, filled with the chaos of toys and laughter. But cracks were forming. Frances and Adrian's marriage had frayed under the weight of young parenthood and whispered temptations. She had started seeing another man, Jeffrey Frello, a smooth-talking local who drew her in with easy smiles. Adrian, too, had his distractions, but he poured his energy into his kids, shielding them from the growing storm. 3 weeks before tragedy struck, she quietly purchased 3 life insurance policies, $50,000 each for Adrian, Farah, and herself. She forged Adrian's signature on the premiums, slipping them through without a word, naming herself the beneficiary on his and her daughter's plan. Was it fear of losing everything, or a darker scheme unfolding? Prosecutors would later argue it was premeditation, a calculated web spun in secrecy. Frances claimed it was just precaution, a safety net for the kid. But on the night of April 7, 1987, those papers would cast a long, accusing shadow. Adrian, exhausted from a long shift, settled into the living room recliner with a beer, flipping through channels on the old TV. Frances stepped out briefly, she later said, to run an errand. But when she returned, the house that once hummed with life fell eerily silent. It was an execution-style slaughter, cold and methodical. Adrian was found slumped in his chair, shot twice in the chest and head with a small-caliber pistol, his eyes forever frozen in surprise. Blood pooled on the worn carpet, staining the edges of a throw rug where Alton often played. The boy, just 7, lay in his bedroom doorway, a single bullet through his temple, his dinosaur pajamas twisted as if he'd stirred at the noise, only to meet his end in the dark. Little Farah, the heart of the home, was in her crib, her tiny body curled as if sleeping, but a shot to the head had silenced her forever. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of gunpowder, and the faint, heartbreaking scent of baby powder. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just 3 lives snuffed out in under a minute, the killer slipping away into the night like a ghost. Frances returned to a nightmare. She screamed for help, neighbors rushing in to find her cradling Farah's body, her nightgown spattered with the evidence of loss. But questions swirled immediately. Why was she out? Where was the gun? Police arrived at the modest home, their flashlights cutting through the horror like knives. The crime scene was a puzzle of intimate betrayal. Fingerprints smudged on doorframes, a child's toy knocked askew. Detectives combed the house for hours, photographing every angle, bagging the bloodied carpet fibers in shell casings. The weapon, .25 caliber pistol, traced back to Michael Moton, who'd loaned it to his cousin, Jeffrey Frello, Frances's new flame. Frello admitted keeping it in his bedroom drawer right where Frances had been visiting often. Ballistics matched the bullets pulled from the bodies. To that very gun, undeniable links forged in lead. Then came the witnesses, whispers turning to shouts. A relative saw Frances stuffing a paper bag rumored to hold the gun into a closet. Just days after the murder, she claimed she'd found it in her home and hid it for safety. But the jury's eyes narrowed. Fibers from her skirt matched traces at the scene, though contamination later muddied deeper tests. And the insurance, that forged signature, glared like a confession. Frances spun a tale of a shadowy drug dealer named Charlie, saying Adrian owed him money for a habit the family swore he never had. Adrian's parents, heartbroken pillars of the community, painted him as clean living, devoted dad, no debts, no demon. But the evidence was overwhelming. It piled up like the grief in that empty house, pointing straight back to the young wife with the steady hand and the hidden pistol. The trial unfolded in Houston's 18th District Court in the fall of 1988. A spectacle of raw emotion under fluorescent lights. Frances, now 23, sat composed in a simple dress, her dark hair pulled back, eyes darting to the jury of 12 strangers. Prosecutors painted her as a calculating killer, motive rooted in greed and infidelity. The insurance payout her bloody prize. Defense attorneys fought back, screaming reasonable doubt. Charlie, the phantom dealer, planted evidence. A grieving widow railroaded. But the jury didn't believe her story. After deliberating just hours, they returned with guilty on 3 counts of capital murder. Sentencing came swift, death by lethal injection. The needle's promise of finality sealing her fate. Appeals cascaded like a torrent. State courts, federal benches, even the U.S. Supreme Court twice denying stays. In 2004, Governor Rick Perry granted a rare 20-day reprieve for more forensics. But tests yielded nothing new. Last-minute pleas from Adrian's own parents, pacifists opposed to the death penalty, begged for mercy. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 7-0 against clemency. Controversial to the end, her case sparked debates on family killings and young offenders, but justice in Texas' eyes demanded its due. Then came September 14, 2005 at the Huntsville unit. The walls where echoes of final breaths linger in the walls. Lethal injection, Texas's chosen method, since 1982, is a clinical ritual masked as mercy. At 6:00 p.m., the process began. Strapped to a gurney in a sterile chamber, IV lines snaked into her arms, saline flushing the tubes. Witnesses, reporters, victims, kin, prison staff gathered behind glass, hearts pounding in the hush. The cocktail followed. First sodium thiopental to numb the world into sleep, then pancuronium bromide to paralyze every muscle, locking breath in place. Finally, potassium chloride to stop the heart in a silent stutter. No thrashing, no screams, just a veil of calm over the storm. Frances's final meal. She waved it, no shocking request, just the weight of what she'd lost. Now in those last moments, as the clock ticked towards 6:17 p.m., Frances turned her head to the window. No words escaped her lips. No final statement. No plea for forgiveness. Her eyes, once bright with a young mother's love, now dulled by regret, met the stares of those she'd orphaned in spirit. At 6:17 p.m., the team confirmed. Heart stopped. Life ended. Frances Elaine Newton, 40 years old, became the 3rd woman executed in Texas's modern era. Her youth at the crime, a tender 21, forever a haunting footnote in the ledger of the damned. Next, we dive into the gripping tale of a woman who wielded a pickaxe at just. Case 2, Karla Faye Tucker. The Pickaxe Prayers, Karla Faye Tucker entered the world on November 18, 1959, in the restless sprawl of Houston, Texas, a city of oil rigs and endless horizons that promised escape but delivered chains. Her childhood was a storm of neglect, battered by a mother's alcoholism, and the roar of rock and roll tours that left young Karla adrift. By age 8, she'd tasted her first hit of meth from her mom's syringe, the bitter rush of false friend in a home fractured by parties and pain. School slipped away like sand at 11. She dropped out, trading books for the road with the Allman Brothers Band, a wide-eyed runaway chasing spotlights that burned too hot. By 14, prostitution shadowed her steps, a survival scar on a frame too young for such weight. At 18, Karla married Stephen Griffith, a mechanic twice her age, but the union crumbled fast under the weight of drugs and restless nights, leaving no children in its wake. In her early 20s, she dove deeper into the abyss. Meth, pills, and heroin, her constant companions, fueling a life of petty thefts and aimless drifts through Houston's underbelly. She fell hard for Daniel Ryan Garrett, a 32-year-old roughneck with sailor's tattoos and a loyalty that tethered him to her chaos. But another figure loomed larger in Karla's story: Jerry Lynn Dean, a 27-year-old mechanic whose steady hands fixed Harleys and mended lives in quiet ways, coaching neighborhood kids on weekends and dreaming of a simple spread outside the city. Jerry was the dependable type, a father figure to his own siblings back home, his apartment a haven of half-built bikes and cold beers after long shifts. But for Karla, he was a ghost from her past, a former lover whose betrayal cut deep. What did he do to end up in her crosshairs? The fuse to murder lit slowly, in the dim glow of old wounds and dope. Years earlier, Karla and Jerry had been lovers, a fling that ended when he married her close friend Sean Jackson. The betrayal stung, but small slights festered into rage. Jerry once parked his leaky motorcycle in Karla's shared apartment, ruining the floor, and during a heated spat, he'd called her a trashy whore, words that burned into her soul. By 1983, high and hollow-eyed at 23, Karla seethed over debts. Jerry owed her money for drugs or favors she claimed, and his refusal to pay became a spark. She and Garrett plotted a burglary, not to kill, they swore, but to steal Jerry's prized motorcycle parts, gleaming chrome to pawn for their next fix. Premeditation hid in plain sight. Garrett borrowed a blue steel pickaxe from a buddy's garage days before. Its 3-foot handle wrapped in tape for grip, the blade honed sharp from years of yard work. Karla pocketed a hunting knife, her fingers tracing its edge like a promise. Motive tangled greed with vengeance. Jerry had crossed her one too many times, and the drugs whispered it was time to settle scores. On June 13, 1983, after a weekend meth binge that left them wired and wild, they piled into Garrett's truck just after midnight, the Houston humidity clinging like sweat on fevered skin. The apartment complex loomed quiet, sodium lights buzzing over parked cars, the air thick with distant thunder. What unfolded inside Jerry's fourth-floor unit was a descent into primal chaos. A crime scene etched in blood and echoes that no amount of scrubbing could erase. They jimmied the door with a screwdriver, slipping in like thieves in a bad dream, the pickaxe slung over Garrett's shoulder like an old friend. Jerry stirred in his bed, a burly frame under thin sheets, his alarm clock glowing. An argument erupted, Karla's voice sharp over unpaid debts. Jerry shoving back in his boxers, groggy but defiant. Garrett grabbed a guitar, smashing it across Jerry's head in a splintering crack that drew first blood. Jerry fought, fists flying in the cramped space, knocking over a lamp that shattered glass across the shag carpet. But then Karla entered the fray, her eyes glazed with meth madness. Grabbing the pickaxe from the floor where it fell, she swung it high, the blade whistling through air heavy with the scent of motor oil and fear. The first blow landed on Jerry's back, tearing through muscle to bone in a wet thud that sprayed red across the wall. He turned, gasping, but she didn't stop. 40 times she brought it down, each strike methodical, fueled by a high that turned revulsion to ecstasy. Jerry's body jerked and stilled on the blood-soaked mattress, his final breath a gurgle lost in the frenzy. Deborah Thornton, 32 and unaware, had crashed in the laundry room after a late shift at her waitressing job. A single mom to 2 young boys, she'd clawed her way through a messy divorce, volunteering at church bake sales to teach her kids resilience, her laughter alight in their tiny apartment across town. That night she'd sought shelter with Jerry, a friend in need, curling up on a pile of clothes to steal sleep. The killers found her there, huddled and helpless. Garrett struck first with a blow to the head, but Karla finished it, 20 savage arcs of the pickaxe. embedding the blade so deep in Deborah's skull that it wedged like a curtain. Blood pooled in crimson rivers, soaking towels and staining the concrete floor, the metallic tang mixing with the faint floral of Deborah's cheap perfume. In the aftermath, as sirens wailed distant, Karla and Garrett high-fived over the carnage, laughing in a drug delirium that chilled investigators to the bone. They rifled drawers for loot, a stereo system, the bike transmission before fleeing into the pre-dawn mist. The pickaxe left buried in flesh like a forgotten tool. The investigation ignited like dry tinder, Houston PD swarming the scene by sunrise, their boots sticking in congealing blood as flashbulbs popped over the horror. Crime scene techs mapped every splatter high-velocity arcs on the ceiling from the pickaxe's fury, low-level pools where bodies slumped. The weapon, pried free with grim care, bore no fingerprints but screamed of rage. Stolen items turned up quick. The stereo pawned at a dive shop 2 miles away, Garrett's name on the ticket. Then the boasts. Friends at a meth den overheard Karla giggling about the buzz of the kills, Garrett mimicking the swings with an imaginary act. 3 days later, paranoia creeping in, they turned themselves in at a rundown motel. But not before Karla spilled a confession to her sister, words tumbling out in vivid detail. The swings, the thrill, the blood warm on her hand. Detectives pounced, recording her account in a sterile interrogation room. Karla calm, almost proud, describing how the pickaxe felt so good, like an orgasm. Ballistics? No guns, but tool marks matched the blade to scratches on Jerry's bed frame. DNA was nascent then, but hair fibers from Karla's wild mane tangled in the bedspread. In Deborah's blood flecked Garrett's boots. Witnesses pieced the timeline, a neighbor hearing thuds at 1:30 a.m., another spotting the truck peeling out. The evidence was overwhelming. It wrapped around them like the chains they couldn't outrun, turning whispers into ironclad proof. The trial in Harris County courtroom unfolded in early 1984, a media circus under Judge Deborah Jewell, where justice clashed with the spectacle of a pretty young killer. Karla, 24 now, took the stand in a modest blouse, her once feral hair tamed, eyes wide with the haze of withdrawal. Prosecutors dissected the savagery. Motive: a cocktail of theft and vengeance, premeditation in the borrowed axe and binged planning. She didn't just kill, the DA thundered. She reveled. Defense leaned on youth and addiction, painting Karla as a victim of circumstance, the meth a monster puppeteering her hand. Garrett testified against her for leniency, his words a knife. She swung wild, laughing all the way. But the jury didn't buy the sob story of a lost girl. After 2 days, they convicted her on 2 counts of capital murder. In April 1984, the penalty phase, sealing death by lethal injection. A sentence rarer for women, but unyielding here. Garrett tried first, drew life. He died in prison in 1997. His role a shadow to her spotlight. Appeals stormed the gates. Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 1988. Upheld federal habeas in 1992, denied. The U.S. Supreme Court rebuffed twice. Once in last-minute stays flickered. Born-again Karla converted in 1983. On death row became a cause célèbre. Her teary TV pleas for mercy aired nationwide. Evangelicals rallied. Even Pat Robertson begged Governor George W. Bush for clemency. Controversial rulings flew. A federal judge granted a stay. Yanked hours later. Bush, unmoved, let the clock tick. Debates raged on gender bias. Redemption's reach. Could a pickaxe sinner find heaven's gate? Time carved Karla from wild child to poised penitent. Her cell a chapel of Bibles and letters, preaching to fellow inmates till the end. February 3, 1998. Dawned crisp at the Huntsville walls. The execution chamber's green tiles gleaming under sterile light. Lethal injection, that veil of veiled violence, unfolded with Texas precision. At 6:25 p.m., the process began. Escorted in pink prison garb, Karla lay on the gurney, wrists and ankles bound, a heart monitor beeping steady resolve, IVs pierced veins in each arm, saline dripping clear as tears. Witnesses filed in, 6 for the state, including victims' kin with stone faces, 5 for her friends clutching hands. The trio flowed, sodium thiopentyl for dreamless sleep, pancuronium to still the storm, potassium chloride to hush the heart. No convulsions, just a deepening quiet. Her final meal, no shocking request, just a simple banana, a ripe peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing, savored in the hush of what-ifs. Yes, sir, I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this. She paused, love threading her words. Baby, I love you. Ron, give Peggy a hug for me. Everybody has been so good to me. I love all of you very much. Then a smile breaking through, almost ethereal. I am going over to see Linda January. I can almost hear Linda saying, okay, Karla, you can do this. There is a light waiting for you. Just go towards the light, and it will be okay. At 7:30, her chest rose one last time. By 7:25, the doctor called it. Karla Faye Tucker, 38 years young once more, in memory, slipped into that light. The first woman executed in Texas since the chamber fell silent, but outside protesters' chants mingled with sobs. A nation wrestling. Had Grace visited the gurney? Or was it just another shadow in the machine? Case 3. Christina Marie Riggs was born on September 2, 1971 in Lawton, Oklahoma, where wide plains and military bases shaped a restless youth. Her early years were scarred by trauma, abused by a relative at age 7. She carried wounds that never fully healed. Her bright smile a mask for a heart that felt too much. By her teens, she drifted through broken homes, her mother's struggles with poverty and her own battles with self-worth pushing her toward fleeting escapes. Alcohol, fleeting romances, and dreams of stability. At 20, Christina became a licensed practical nurse in Oklahoma City, her steady hands giving insulin shots and comfort to patients, a flicker of purpose in a life of chaos. She was a single mother by then, devoted to her son Justin, born in 1992 when she was 21, a bright 5-year-old with a toothy grin who loved Power Rangers and drawing stars on construction paper. In 1994, she welcomed a daughter, Shelby, a gentle 2-year-old with curls and a giggle that lit up their cramped apartment. The children's fathers were gone. Justin's a brief fling. Shelby's a married man who left promises unkept. Christina moved to Sherwood, Arkansas in 1996, chasing a fresh start, working night shifts at a hospital while juggling daycare and bills. But beneath the surface, depression was a silent predator. She loved Justin and Shelby fiercely. Photos showed her kissing their foreheads, baking them cupcakes. But the weight of single motherhood, mounting debts, and untreated mental illness pressed harder each day. Could she keep them safe in a world that felt so cruel? The motive for what came next wasn't greed or rage, but a warped act of love, born in a mind unraveling under despair. By early 1997, Christina, now 24, was drowning. She'd lost her nursing job after a layoff. Her trailer's rent loomed like a guillotine, and her antidepressants sat untouched, too expensive to refill. She confided in her mother, Carol Thomas, that she feared her children would be taken by social services, raised in foster care's cold grip as she once was. In her fractured logic, death seemed kinder than abandonment. Premeditation took shape in quiet, deliberate steps. On April 20, 1997, she drove to a Walmart in Little Rock, purchasing a bottle of amitriptyline, an antidepressant she knew could be lethal in high doses, and potassium chloride, a chemical she'd seen stop hearts in hospital crash carts. That night, in their trailer at 1010 North Spring Street, she tucked Justin and Shelby into bed. Justin in his Spider-Man pajamas, Shelby clutching a stuffed bunny. The air was heavy with the scent of macaroni leftovers and crayons scattered on the table, but the evidence would soon tell a different story. The crime unfolded in the stillness of April 30, 1997, a nightmare cloaked in maternal care. Around 8 p.m., Christina crushed amitriptyline pills into a glass of Kool-Aid, stirring until the powder dissolved. She called Justin to the kitchen, telling him it was medicine to help him sleep. The 5-year-old sipped it trustingly, his eyes heavy within minutes. She carried him to his bed where he drifted into a deep, unnatural sleep. Shelby, just 2, was next. Christina fed her the same laced drink, tucking her into her crib as the toddler's breathing slowed. But the pills weren't enough. Fearing they'd wake in pain, Christina, a nurse trained to save, turned to her final act. She drew potassium chloride into a syringe, injecting it into Justin's arm, then Shelby's, aiming for their veins but missing in her trembling panic. The chemical burned under their skin, stopping their small hearts. By 9:30, Justin lay still, his crayons untouched. Shelby's bunny fell to the floor. Then in a final spiral, Christina swallowed 28 amitriptyline pills and injected herself with potassium chloride, collapsing beside her children, expecting to join them in death. But her body betrayed her. She woke hours later, vomiting, her pulse weak but stubborn. In a haze, she dialed her mother at 4 a.m., sobbing, "I've killed my babies." Carol rushed over, finding the trailer a tomb, two small bodies cold in their beds. Christina slumped and incoherent. Paramedics arrived, their sirens shattering the dawn, but it was too late for Justin and Shelby. The scene was a quiet horror. No blood, no chaos, just a mother's love twisted into an unthinkable end. The air thick with the sweet tang of Kool-Aid and the bitter sting of regret. The investigation moved swiftly, Sherwood police descending on the trailer by 5 a.m., their flashlights catching the glint of an empty syringe on the counter. Detectives found the Walmart receipt for the amitriptyline and potassium chloride, time-stamped from the day before. Autopsies confirmed the cause, lethal doses of amitriptyline in both children's systems, with potassium chloride burns marking failed injections. Christina's confession came fast. She told police every step, her voice flat with shock, detailing the drinks, the injections, her own failed suicide. A suicide note lay on the kitchen table, scrawled in black ink. "I didn't want my kids to suffer in this world. I thought I was saving them." No fingerprints or DNA were needed. Her own words were the news. Neighbors reported hearing nothing. No cries, no struggle, just the eerie silence of a trailer where life had stopped. The evidence was overwhelming. A mother's hand, once gentle, had become the instrument of death. Her intent as clear as the pills she'd ground to dust. The trial began in Pulaski County Circuit Court in March 1998. A somber affair under Judge Chris Piazza. Christina, now 26, sat pale and hollow, her brown hair limp, eyes fixed on the floor. Prosecutors called it murder. Plain and simple, premeditation in the purchased drugs, intent in the injections. She played God with her children's lives, the DA argued, pointing to her nursing knowledge as proof of calculated choice. The defense pleaded insanity, citing her depression, her history of abuse, and a suicide attempt at 13 that foreshadowed her despair. A psychiatrist testified she suffered from major depressive disorder. Her act a delusional attempt to protect her children from a world she saw as cruel. But the jury didn't believe her story. After 6 hours, they convicted her on 2 counts of capital murder on March 26, 1998, sentencing her to death by lethal injection at 26. Her youth no shield against Arkansas's resolve. Appeals followed, lean and futile. The Arkansas Supreme Court upheld the verdict in 1999. Federal appeals failed in 2000. No last-minute stays came. Her case stirred little public outcry, overshadowed by debates over maternal filicide and mental health. Her own mother begged for life imprisonment, but the state held firm. Justice demanded a final price. On death row at the McPherson unit, Christina aged from a desperate 24 to a resigned 28. Her cell walls lined with drawings from other inmates. Her Bible worn from nightly reading. May 2, 2000. Arrived gray and cold at the Cummins unit in Varner, Arkansas, where the execution chamber waited, its white walls stark under fluorescent hum. Lethal injection, Arkansas's method since 19. Christina, in a white jumpsuit, was strapped to a gurney, her arms extended like a fallen angel. IV lines fed into both veins, saline flushing the tubes as a heart monitor beeped her fading rhythm. Witnesses, reporters, state officials, no family stood behind glass, their breaths held in the sterile quiet. The drugs flowed in sequence. Sodium thiopental, to plunge her into sleep. Pancuronium bromide, to paralyze her lungs. Potassium chloride, to still her heart. Her final meal, no shocking request, just fried chicken, peas and a slice of apple pie, eaten slowly as if savoring a memory of her children's laughter. At 9:09 p.m., as the chemicals took hold, Christina turned to the witnesses, her voice soft but clear. "I love my children. I hope they're with God now, and I hope He forgives me. I'm ready to go home to them." No tears, just a calm resolve, her eyes closing as if dreaming of Justin's stars and Shelby's curls. At 9:18 p.m., the doctor pronounced her gone. Christina Marie Riggs, 28 years old, her crime at 24 a wound that never healed. The chamber emptied, but the question lingered like a ghost. Could a mother's love so terribly broken ever find peace in the justice of a needle? Case 4, Marilyn K. Plantz. Marilyn K. Sellers entered life on October 19, 1960 in the open skies of Oklahoma, where family ties ran deep and small-town rhythms set the pace. Raised in a modest household, she blossomed into a poised young woman, her smile warm enough to teach Sunday school and her hands steady as a homemaker. By her early 20s, Marilyn married James Earl Plantz in 1978, a union that promised stability amid the oil bust echoes of the 80s. James, born in 1955, was the epitome of quiet reliability, a 33-year-old pressroom supervisor at the Oklahoman newspaper in Oklahoma City, where he'd toiled for over a decade on night shifts, his calloused fingers inking headlines that chronicled others' lives. He was a devoted provider, coaching his kids' soccer games on rare days off, grilling burgers in the backyard, and saving for a family vacation to the Ozarks. Their home at 1424 Cedar Lane, in Midwest City, was a snapshot of suburban bliss, a ranch-style house with a swing set, where laughter mingled with the scent of fresh-baked pie. Daughter Trina, 9, was a pig-tailed artist with dreams of ballet. Son Christopher, 6, a freckled explorer who collected rocks and adored his dad's bedtime tales of newspaper adventures. But beneath the veneer, discontent brewed. Marilyn, now 27, chafed at the frugality. James's overtime left her alone with the kids, and whispers of her flirtations hinted at a wandering heart. Enter William Clifford Bryson, an 18-year-old drifter with a troubled past, whom she met through mutual friends. Their affair ignited in secrecy, a thrill that turned toxic when Marilyn confided her marital woes, claims of James's abuse, later disputed, and the allure of 2 life insurance policies, totaling $319. What if freedom and fortune lay just one fiery accident away? The motive crystallized in the haze of infidelity and avarice, a premeditated scheme whispered over late-night drives and motel trysts. By summer 1988, Marilyn had convinced Bryson that James was a monster, his beatings a fabricated lash to justify the unthinkable. She promised him half the payout, dangling cash for a new life, far from Oklahoma's dust. Premeditation unfolded in layers. Weeks earlier, Marilyn secured the policies, forging details to maximize coverage. She recruited Bryson, then enlisted his friend Clinton Eugene McKimble, another 18-year-old desperate for quick money, offering $5,000. They plotted under the guise of normalcy, baseball bats stashed in the garage, gasoline cans hidden in the shed. On August 25, 1988, as James clocked out at 3 a.m. from his shift, the trap waited. Marilyn kissed the kids goodnight, Trina tucked with her sketch pad, Christopher clutching a stuffed bear, then paced the living room, her heart a drumbeat of resolve. But the evidence would soon tell a different story. A crime erupted in the pre-dawn hush of August 26, 1988. A brutal ambush cloaked in the home's familiar shadows. James pulled into the driveway at 4 a.m., his pickup crunching gravel, exhaustion etching his face from another 12-hour grind. Marilyn greeted him at the door, her smile a siren's call, ushering him inside where Bryson and McKimble lurked in the dim hallway, bats gripped like grim reapers. No warning, just the first swing, a Louisville slugger cracking against James's skull with a sickening thud that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. He staggered, blood blooming on his work shirt, but fought back, his printer's strength shoving Bryson into the coffee table, shattering a lamp that sprayed glass like brittle stars. Marilyn watched, frozen yet complicit, as McKimble joined the fray, bats raining down in a frenzy, over 20 blows to James's head, arms and torso fracturing ribs and splitting skin in ragged gash. Blood arced across the beige carpet, soaking the edges where Trina's toys lay forgotten, the metallic scent mingling with the faint vanilla of Marilyn's air freshener. James crumpled, gasping, "Please, why the kids?" But mercy was absent. Still breathing, they dragged his limp 180-pound frame to the truck, propping him in the driver's seat like a macabre mannequin. Bryson doused the cab with 5 gallons of gas from the shed, the fumes choking the air, then struck a match. Flames whooshed skyward as they sped away, James's truck a pyre on a remote dirt road near the North Canadian River. Autopsies later revealed the horror. He was alive during the blaze, smoke in his lungs from futile breaths, his body charred beyond recognition, skin sloughing like wax, the fire's roar drowning any final cry. The scene was a tableau of calculated cruelty. No struggle marks outside the home, just the acrid ghost of arson, and the twisted metal of a life extinguished for profit. Oklahoma Highway Patrol troopers, circling the smoldering wreck off Highway 62, where farmers' calls of a truck fire had drawn. The VIN traced to James Plantz, his wallet, melted but intact, confirmed the victim. Back at the house, detectives knocked at 8:08, finding Marilyn composed in her robe, claiming ignorance. He didn't come home from work. But cracks appeared fast. A neighbor glimpsed 2 young men fleeing at dawn, bats tossed in bush, blood stains on the carpet, hastily scrubbed with bleach. glowed under luminol. Fibers from James's shirt snagged on the doorframe. Marilyn's alibi crumbled when Bryson, racked by guilt, confessed to police on August 28. His videotaped account spilling the plot, the bats, the beating, the fire, Marilyn's urging, "Make it look like an accident." McKimble flipped next, pleading guilty for life. His testimony sealing the noose. Details of the $319,000 motive. The promised split. Marilyn's post-murder shopping spree on James's credit card for new lingerie. Insurance agents flagged the quick claim. Bank records showed her pocketing advances while plotting. Witnesses like Roderick Ferris overheard her boasts. "Jim's gone and I'm rich." No DNA in 1988's toolkit, but the confessions and physical traces. Bloody clothes dredged from the river, woven unbreakable web. The evidence was overwhelming. It burned brighter than the truck's flames, turning a grieving widow into the architect of ash. The trial ignited in Oklahoma County District Court in March 1989, a joint spectacle before Judge Carolyn R. Reagan, where media swarmed like moths to the flame. Marilyn, 28, now sat, demure in a floral dress, her blonde hair curled, eyes downcast as if in prayer. Prosecutors eviscerated her as the mastermind, motive greed, premeditation in the bats and gas, her presence the coup de grace. She watched her husband die for dollars. The DA roared, parading McKimble's tearful testimony and Bryson's defense cried coercion. Bryson, the hot tad, Marilyn a battered victim, gaslit into complicity, begging separate trials but denied. The jury, unmoved by her Sunday school tears, deliberated under 2 hours guilty on first-degree murder, conspiracy, solicitation, and arson by April 9. Sentencing followed swift 5 hours of debate, yielding death for Marilyn and Bryson, plus 100 years for recruiting, 10 for conspiracy, 15 for arson. Supreme Court rebuffing certiorari on February. Last-minute pleas from her children, now teens, and anti-death penalty vigils flickered, but faded. Governor Frank Keating stayed silent. Controversial to her core, the case fueled fires over accomplice liability and women's rarity on death row. Yet, Oklahoma's gavel fell unyielding. Death row at Mabel Bassett Correction Center molded Marilyn from schemer to seeker. Her cell a sanctuary of Bibles after a jailhouse conversion, mentoring inmates till the call came. May 1, 2001, unfolded humid, at Oklahoma State Penitentiary. In McAlester, DH Unit's chamber, a vault of green tile and steel. Lethal injection, Oklahoma's right since 19. Strapped to the gurney in a white gown, ivies threading her arms like veins of fate, Celine humming through tubes. Witnesses arrayed, prosecutors stone-faced, her pastor clasping a Bible, reporters scribbling in. The sequence surged, sodium thiopental for oblivion's embrace, pancuronium bromide, to bind the body, potassium chloride, to quench the pulse. Her final meal, a shocking request from Taco Bell, 1 chicken taco salad, 1 Mexican pizza, 2 enchiritos, 2 chicken soft tacos, cinnamon twists, washed with a large Diet Coke, devoured with a quiet nod to lost comfort. Marilyn raised her head, voice steady with newfound faith, eyes sweeping the glass, eyes sweeping the glass. I have overcome the world. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from the love of God. If you all want to see me again, you must be born again. A pause, then silence as the drugs claimed her. At 9:11 p.m., the warden called time. Marilyn K. Plantz, 40 years etched in regret, exhaled her last. The third woman executed in modern Oklahoma. The room emptied to protest's murmur, but one ember glowed. In the inferno she lit, had salvation's light finally pierced the smoke. We followed the dark paths of 4 young women, Frances Newton, Karla Faye Tucker, Christina Riggs, and Marilyn Plantz. At 21, Frances killed her family for money. At 23, Karla's pickaxe ended 2 lives in a drugged rage. Christina, 24, poisoned her kids to spare them pain. Marilyn, 27, burned her husband for insurance. Their crimes shocked us. Their executions silenced them. What pushed them to such darkness? Their stories leave us wondering where justice meets mercy. If these tales moved you, like this video and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts below. What do they say to you? More stories wait, but we need your voice to keep going.